influences on our reality. Okay, so we need to understand the concept of this historical approach to organization theory. Back in a modernist time, what do you think that means, the existence of independent and objective reality? What do you think that meant? Some might say that people were certain, absolutely certain, for example, that God existed, that God exists. They were absolutely categorically certain that God was the creator. And now we've come through a period for, thank you to Darwin, who said, no, God doesn't exist. It's a fiction, an imagination. And so in the postmodern view, there is no absolute truth. Now we don't have to agree with that, do we? Some of us will say, yes, God exists, he is the creator, or she. Some will say, no, God doesn't exist, that's a myth. Okay, so we have different views on reality. If you had two people standing in a doorway, and it starts to rain, let's say with two men standing in the doorway. One of them says, oh, great, it's raining. And the other man says, oh, no, it's raining. Why would that be? Why would one man say, it's great, it's raining, the other one say, oh, no, darn it, it's raining. Why? Is their attitude, their outlook, yes?
Negative thinking, positive thinking.
Positive thinking, negative thinking is one way of looking at it.
Different life circumstances.
Different life circumstances.
Oh, they have different needs.
Yes, different needs, that's right. So, for example, one is a farmer and he needs the rain for the crops. The other one is running a party in the open air, and if it rains, it's going to be a washout. So it's the same reality, but a different perception, isn't it? So, in a postmodern view, we might see things differently. And we might want to argue differently. So, but we also need to understand that when we come across, and you said, for example, there were outdated models or methods of thinking, those were current at the time. I mean, for example, can you believe that people thought the world was flat? People believed the world was flat. If you go out too far, you'll fall off the edge. And I think there was an elephant holding the plate up, the saucer. So, in fact, that was their reality. So, and science, of course, is always adapting reality. It's always saying, this is absolutely correct. There's no such thing as quantum physics. Now we know there is something called quantum physics. So actually reality appears to be changing. So that's the historical perspective we need to bear in mind in terms of understanding an approach to organization theory. Things are changing. Now, a contemporary, no, not a contemporary, but classical study of organizations, going back to the early part of the 20th century, would focus on control through rational and legal authority. Now, the point about these slides is there's all the material in here. So if this kind of hits over the top of your head, it's actually okay to go back and look at the detail which is in here. So I brought these slides based on what this book is saying. Now this book is ideal for the new CIPD qualification. It doesn't mean to say this is the only book. There are other books, and you'll see there's plenty of references in the back with the bibliography, of course. But you'll find most of this material will relate on the slides to what's in here. Does that reassure you? Okay. So if this is not clear, at some point you should be able to go back into the book and find more material around it. But just to give you a big picture, we're talking about the big picture at the moment. We're talking about, historically we saw at the beginning of the 20th century a classical view on organizations about being a bureaucracy. And the word bureaucracy, from the French bureau, from office, a kind of highly structured, rational legal authority, hierarchical, typical. And then as we began to see the influence of Henry Ford and Frederick Taylor, we saw scientific management come into play. And we saw the focus on efficiency and control of work processes using scientific methods. Still logical, but now science was telling us that human behavior, people are like this. And so that's influenced much of our history of organizations, particularly in the American academic area around Harvard and MIT. And particularly around mass production, you remember, Henry Ford. And then we saw the influence of the Human Relations School. We're going to come back into a little more detail later on, but just to give you the big picture, the Human Relations School, Mayo, said that it focuses on control through human relationships. Do you think that outlook, that perspective, is different to this outlook, to this outlook? What do you think? If you held this outlook today, would you be up to date? No. Do you think there are some organizations that still hold that view on organizations? Yes. So it's possible not to necessarily move with the times, but to hold a perspective, a picture, which is, this is how organizations should function best. Okay, so we could be using, if you like, old-fashioned. That doesn't necessarily mean to say that this is perfect. It's an invention, which is using more knowledge, but not necessarily accurate. Do you think, for example, that organizations should be run on human relationships basis?
Not only.
Not only. No, that's right. We can't be too rigid, can we? Because we probably want to blend a bit of this with a bit of that and make a nice cake with the blends, okay? We can't be entirely making a cake with just butter and flour. We need other things to blend in. So, but necessarily, it's useful to have a